So shall I say the date when I was born here and all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I don't.
this-
We never had a pine tree, so this has grown up in the last. Beautiful tree.
Yeah. But this is it, right?
Yeah, this is it.
Wow.
It's a big L-shaped house.
I think it's on. I'm gonna jump down with them. I'll give you a thumbs up. When you can
Okay.
start walking.
So I'm going to walk very slowly because the story will take a few minutes, you know.
Absolutely. And I think Brian, you can start talking from here, right?
I can't see where you are. He's in and out there, so.
So wait until you get to about 5 steps in, and then you can start talking.
5 steps in.
Yeah, and then just as you're walking over there, you can be chatting, but you need to be about 5 steps.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm Tibor Eisen, known as Max Eisen. I was born here in this house March the 15th, 1929, 90 years ago. There are so many wonderful memories that I.
Sorry. Let's actually have you walk up to the camera and then start talking.
No, it's okay. It's this one cutting it.
Oh, sorry. That was my bad. So let's have you walk up to the camera where Ryan told you and then start talking.
Okay, so I repeat the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Tibor Eisen, known as Max Eisen. This is my home. I was born on March the 15th, 1929. So this is 90 years plus a couple of months. The place is hardly recognizable. It's become an industrialized area with corrugated fences and so on. In this house lived my partial extended family. My mother, father, and my 2 brothers and my little sister, we lived in the front of the house, as you can see. We had a large kitchen and dining room and 2 bedrooms and the Speise room, and my grandparents, they had their own quarters in the middle. And further towards the end lived my uncle and my aunt. His name was Eugene Eisen and Irene Eisen. My father's name was Zoltan Eisen. My mother's name was Ethel. My younger brother's name was Eugene and Alfred. And our baby sister, she was born in 1943, Judith Eisen. And my Aunt Bella, who was an invalid, lived with my grandparents. So, as a child, I remember sitting in the lap of my Aunt Bella. I believe she had polio. And she taught me and my younger brother how to read when I was 5 years old. I think I read all the books of Jules Verne. And ever since then, I became an avid reader of books. My younger brother, Eugene, everybody in town knew that he is a genius. And of course, he was murdered so young as a child. And his talents have been lost to the world. And Alfred was the only blonde and blue-eyed. My 2 siblings and my little sister, she was a beautiful little doll. She was born, there was a 14-year gap between her and myself. And she was born in 43, and that was not a good time for a Jewish child to be born or a Jewish mother to give birth. So I grew up here in this large house. It was an amazing way of growing up. I was the firstborn. Imagine there were 3 kitchens. I had all these choices. I know that when my mother cooked tomato soup and rice, I was running because for some reason I didn't like tomato soup and rice. I wound up at my grandmother's kitchen or my aunt's. My grandfather, Raphael Fabian Eisen, he had a lumber yard over here, a large shed. That's gone. My grandfather was a man of the land. He was a non-commissioned officer in the First World War in the Austro-Hungarian cavalry. He knew horses, animals. My grandmother, Malvina, I remember she always stuck a little couple of cookies in my pocket when I left for school. I had a bicycle. Every child had a bicycle. I went to public school. I went to Talmud Torah, Hebrew school. In this town, there were 90 Jewish families. The town's population was approximately 5,000 people. And we Jews were 10%, 500 Jews in total. We were traditional Orthodox Jews. My grandfather had a beard and the side curls just like Emperor Franz Joseph had. And 9 or 10 buddies of my grandfather, they served in the same cavalry unit. They all had beards like Emperor Franz Joseph because they were so thankful to the emperor that Jews were emancipated. They would truly lay their lives down fighting for the empire. My grandfather fought in the Russian front for 2 years. So I'm going through public school, Talmud Torah. Came home from Talmud Torah at 7 o'clock in the evening. Sunday, it was all day Talmud Torah. And I was not a very good student. I was good at a few things: geography, history, art. But I knew a lot of work skills. My grandfather was truly my role model. My mother was my guardian angel. She made sure that we had a balanced diet. We always had beautiful clothes that she made herself. In 1939, well, let's say 1938, I was on my holiday, summer holiday, visiting my maternal family. They had a big farm. It was a little place called Kolbashov, not far from Michalovce. And my mother took me to Košice, and then she put me on a train that chugged along for a couple hours, and I got off at a station, and my uncle waited for me with a beautiful carriage and 2 prancing horses. So there was my grandmother. My grandfather, I think, died before I was born, and my 2 strapping uncles who ran the farm. They were still single, Pavel and Herman. And there were many other uncles and aunts who lived in the vicinity. And my grandmother's farm gathered all her grandchildren, sometimes 6, sometimes 8, sometimes 10 grandchildren. And 2 of them especially, they came from Velkis every year when I came. They were older than I was, Edith and Lily. I love these 2 girls. They were truly amazing, beautiful girls. I don't remember the others. I remember another Friedman. He was a teenager. He came from Michalovce. He was always dressed in his beautiful white slacks. He always saddled a horse and off he went. And I was thinking that one day I'm going to be able to do the same thing. So in 1938, my uncle grabbed me. My holiday wasn't over. I still had about 3 weeks to go. And he took me down to the railway station and sent me home. And I didn't understand why. I came back home. Czechoslovakia declared martial law. Everybody had to do, my father, my uncle, patrolling the streets. We lived near the Hungarian border. I didn't understand that Czechoslovakia became the topic at the Munich conference. Hitler threatened war, and eventually the country was partitioned. So after 1938, the last holiday, I never saw my maternal side of the family ever again. So the Hungarians arrived. Our life changed drastically. There were edicts being posted all over this town of what Jews can and cannot do. Our teachers, the police, and the bureaucracy, the Slovak bureaucracy, left, and they were replaced by Hungarian gendarmes, Hungarian teachers, and bureaucrats. And these edicts posted. My father had a distillery in town, and a drinking place. It was called a cellar. In Hungarian, it was called a pinsa. We were all ethnic Hungarians here. We spoke Hungarian. I learned Slovak when I started school. I believe the first edict was the Jews cannot sell alcohol and tobacco. My father's business was confiscated without any compensation. And other edicts were posted. All young Jewish men from 18 to 45 had to report to labor battalions. So all the working parents, the fathers, were gone. There were many families who had to work. The father had to work to earn his daily bread. And we had to, those that had more, we had to help these people. We had a helper. My mother had a helper whose name was Anna. She came to live with us when I was born in 1929. And that edict said that Jews cannot employ non-Jewish people. And she didn't want to leave. And two gendarmes, Hungarian gendarmes, were a very scary bunch, very crude. They wore a black felt hat with red rooster feathers. And they simply removed her forcibly from our home. So my mother was left with even more work. You see, you look at this house, it looks terrible. This was a beautifully tended, lovingly tended house. It was a very busy place. There were chickens, geese, and ducks roaming all over the place. We had a Alsatian whose name was Farkas, who looked after this entire property, guarded this property. Never did anybody encroach our property in the middle of the night. And we had two fox terriers. So my father was allowed to come home once a year for a week to see how their family was doing. And the other fathers too. The Hebrew teacher was taken away. And eventually in school, it was very problematic for us Jewish kids. Hungarian teachers were terrible Jew haters. I think anti-Semite is a mild word. They simply beat the tar out of us. And they even encouraged, imagine 10% of the student body arriving in school, public school, everybody piled up on the Jewish kids. And this happened when this change happened. This poison arrived. And we had to fight our way through every day. We didn't win many fights, but we had to take care of ourselves. So I was 12 and a half years old. We Jewish kids were thrown out of school. My mother took me away to Košice. We had some cousins there. So I lived with them, and I became an apprentice working in a fur shop. It was a Jewish business company. So Friday afternoon, I was allowed to go home. I got on the train, came back home for the Sabbath. I had all kinds of stories to tell my friends who were still living in Moldova. And I was in Košice working as an apprentice. As an apprentice, you do the dirty work, sweep and clean, start the fires, clean the ovens from ashes. But you know, I had this skill of following orders to a T, as they say. Looking back, my family was such an amazing work ethic, especially my grandfather. He always insisted, no matter what I was doing, I had to be the best at it. So in hindsight, I look at it and I think about it as if they prepared a map for me to travel by. And arriving in Auschwitz at 15 years old, I think that it really helped me survive that 1 year that seemed like a million years. So 1944, April, the last year of the war, we were going to celebrate Pesach, Passover. It is a big to-do in an Orthodox family. All the clothing has to be taken outside. They were hung on ropes. Every pocket had to be turned inside out. All bread products had to be removed. The house was painted inside, the rooms. Special dishes were prepared for Passover. And we sat down to the Seder, the first Seder. It was April the 14th, 1944. My father and uncle were home. That was truly a miracle. I don't know how they managed to do this. And we started the Seder. The youngest child, my younger brother, Alfred, asked the questions. Why is this night different than any other night? Why do we eat bitter herbs? And the father answers, it's to remember how difficult it is to be a slave. All these wonderful foods were prepared. In 1944, we did not lack any food. We had ample food. So the Seder wound up about 12 o'clock at night, and everything was cleaned and put away. And we knew we were going to go to sleep, and we'll get up at a leisurely time tomorrow morning, and we'll go to the synagogue wearing yellow stars. We still walk the streets wearing yellow stars. I recall my grandfather, my father and uncle. My grandfather was saying that if we manage to survive another 4 or 5 months, we are going to be liberated by the Red Army. This truly was the last supper for my family. Never, ever to be repeated again. Next morning, well, there was an event in the middle of the night. Somebody was knocking on our gate. My father looked out the window. It was a friend of his, forester, who was standing on the street here in front of the house, in front of the gate, with his horse and buggy. And he said to my father, Zoltan, open the gate. That was truly a happening. Everybody was up. He was allowed to come in. The gates were closed. He was taken to my grandfather's quarters because the decisions were made by my grandfather. He had the last word. And he said he just came from the pub, and the gendarmes are all gathered, and tomorrow morning all the Jews will be taken away. So I remember this so vividly. My grandfather said, this is the Sabbath and the first night of Passover, and we're not going anywhere on a horse and buggy. And that truly was a fatal decision. Had we known something, looking back, How does one understand that we didn't know in 1944 what was happening just across the Carpathian Mountains to millions of Jews? Had we known something, I'm sure he would have decided differently. So early morning, our door was kicked in. 2 gendarmes kicked in the door to our bedroom, and they were yelling and screaming that you have 2 minutes to pack a bundle. We are taking you away. If you have any money or jewelry, hand it over, because where you're going to have no need of this. Terrible. Rude awakening. My mother said put on layers of clothing. She was a very practical lady. She had the baby in her arm. My father said put your boots on. We had custom-made boots that were made by a Jewish shoemaker, Mr. Gutman. And my father went into the quarters of my grandparents to see how they were doing. My grandfather was 77. My grandmother was 75. And we were marched out, forced out of our property. The doors were locked. Our dogs were barking their head off. Farkas knew that something terrible is going on here. And by 2 gendarmes, we were guarded like a bunch of criminals. 500 Jews. It took them a day to assemble all the Jewish families from the town itself, from the farms. And we spent the first night of Passover, 250 local Jews in one room, 250 in the other room. It was a terrible night. Next morning, the 500 Jews were assembled in the schoolyard, public school, and we were marched through the town. The townsfolk were jeering at us, throwing things at us. It was a terrible exodus. We were telling the exodus of the ancient Israelites the previous night, and this was an exodus for the Jews from Sepsi, that was the Hungarian name of the town. The rabbi was made to walk in the front of the column. The rabbi is leading his flock out of the city. The rabbi's wife was an invalid. She was not allowed to use her wheelchair. Her 2 sons had to carry her on a chair. Mothers were not allowed to have carriages. So my mother had a baby in one arm, a bundle, and some utensils in a sheet on her back. And we were loaded in this railway station here and taken to Kasha, and we wound up in a brickyard, and we lived there for 3 weeks under horrible conditions. And a SS officer came to the brickyard every day, and he told us the following story: that you're going to be resettled in the east, you'll be working on farms, and families will be together. And we believed it. We loaded into a cattle car, and I think I need to take a break. Sorry. How did that go? So I just need to take a break, get out of the sun for a few minutes.
Of course.
And,
Yes, thank you.
okay.
Yes, do you need a rest in the car or something like that?
Yeah, I just want to get out of the sun for a little while. Yeah. Oh, that's a good thing.
Water?
I
Yeah.
think you made a break exactly when the time came for a break.
Yep.
Okay.
I think we got